All right, I don't know what time it is on your clock, but I know what I'm getting ready for. It is time for the Professional CISO Podcast with David Malicoat.
Welcome, one and all, to the Professional CISO Show, Industry Series. I'm your host, David Malicoat. This show is an exploration of the topics necessary to transform the CISO role into that of a professional. All right, so before we begin with our guest today, we've got a huge reminder. CISO XC is in DFW, and so April 17th, 2025, all day, home turf. This is where CISO XC started, and come visit our guests that we have on the show today because they are one of the major sponsors, from what I understand. And so Symmetry Systems will be there. Go ahead and check them out while you're there. Also, I want to give a little bit of a shout out, Alyssa Kohlenberg. She is a very early supporter before we even recorded minute one on the show, and has been a cheerleader from that point forward, and I truly appreciate it. So I want to say thank you and give her that public shout out because she's been a great resource. And then finally, please like, follow, share. Best way to make sure that this content keeps coming to you, hit that follow button on Spotify and Apple, hit subscribe on YouTube, maybe even hit that little bell to make sure you get that notification, and follow us on LinkedIn. And of course, share us with a friend or colleague. All right, so this is our first one out of the gate with the Industry Series. This is a special segment of the Professional CISO Show and expands beyond just CISOs into explore the entire cybersecurity ecosystem. And in this series, we sit down with vendors, founders, venture capitalists, and other key industry leaders that are shaping the future of the industry for us today. So really stoked to bring this to you guys. It's interesting as you go along and record a lot of these episodes. I think we do a great job of telling the CISO story, but as it went on and we gained more attention, it became very clear that this was a very large piece of our industry that was missing in our content that was putting out. So I would like to introduce Mohit Tiwari, CEO and co-founder of Symmetry Systems, and then Anand Singh, newly appointed Chief Security and Strategy Officer of Symmetry Systems also. He is also a former guest of the show and episode 35. So, gentlemen, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David, for having us.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Mohit. I want the origin story for Symmetry Systems, right? So I think in whenever I talk to a vendor or in our space, I always want to hear that origin story. I want to hear, how did it start? Something cool happened, I'm sure. There was a call at some point that, came, the light went on in your head, like this has to be a thing. Start us there. How did you guys get started?
So the light took a long time to go off. So we were born out of UT Austin, just down south of here. Yeah. We were a research group working on this niche area called information flow control. It sounds very corner case, but it's very simple. It addresses this basic need that I have, that I think most people have, about I would like to have some agency over how my data is used. Sometimes I want privacy, sometimes I want to share, but I want to have agency. So this need really boils down to this technical problem. We have been doing research around this with the NSA, with Lockheed, with General Dynamics on one side. Then we took this to hospitals, so Ascension Hospital in Austin, working with the complex care clinic where healthcare happened outside the hospital. So we worked with them to figure out how can we build in information flow control, this control over data, into a platform that just makes HIPAA and all these kind of regulations be part of the platform. So we did a lot of this work, and in the end, we were working with a cloud provider when a rash of MongoDB ransomware happened. And that's when I would say the light kind of went on that, hey, we can apply information flow control to just the data stores. And if we do that, we can reconstruct how information is moving across an organization. And if we understand that, we actually can help people who are building applications or being stewards of data, them have visibility into how data is moving, get them in the position to be better stewards. And then all of this is kind of step one. And where this is going is we can now start building tools to not just have visibility, but synthesize the controls. So whether it's a cloud environment and you get synthesized Terraform, whether it's a data lake, you get synthesized kind of transformations. Wherever the data goes, the protection kind of naturally follows.
Right.
That's been the arc for us. it's a very, very long area of research, and we're really excited that it's now hitting massive mainstream.
So talk to me about that transformation from a research project at a university into getting funded and actually starting a company.
Yeah, so we, in 2015, me, my ex-student, now co-founder, very proud to say, Case and Hunger, him and my brother, Puneet, the three of us sort of got together and kind of committed to we've seen enough of information flow control in different places. Let's figure out what's the product variant of it. So there's the science of it, but then figuring out what's the product in the market and who's the buyer, they're all these details. So we spent about 4 years just messing around at UT, and UT was super supportive, got us a lot of resources and connections to help try this out. Around 2019, after that ransomware MongoDB POC, we were pretty convinced things looked great. General Dynamics, they were a great supporter. They're like, hey, if you come out and build it on OpenShift, we'll partner with you, etc. So that's when we spun out through UT. We got introduced to VCs. We did a lot of this VC pitches, and in the end, we found a VC who's really deep in security, ForgePoint Capital. If you're listening,
familiar,
right? They put us in front of a lot of CISOs, and just the diligence process itself was super helpful to us.
Right.
So we were like, even though there were other VCs who were offering great terms, we went with the one that we thought was deepest in security. And then we found another one, Prefix Capital, who was really expert at taking deep tech projects and getting them to IPO and beyond. So they knew how kind of researchers think and what are all the gaps, which we have a lot of, how to kind of help compensate for that. So they've been great mentors over the last few years. So that's how we constructed.
All right, Anand, I'm going to hit you up because I want to hear your origin story on how you went from CISO now to the vendor side, CSO and strategy.
Absolutely. So if you look at my history, David, I have a history of continuously doing something new.
Yes.
So my first job was working on supercomputers, Cray Research.
Yep.
And I was writing code for the compilers of Cray Research. One of the hardest things that you can do, and I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. My second job was a startup. My third job was with Target Corporation. From a startup, I went to the other extreme and I went for a Fortune 50 company. After that, I went to United Health Group, a Fortune 10 company, right? Healthcare, retail, financial, right? My most recent company was Alchemy Technology, a company that I joined in late Series B stages, went all the way from Series B to Series C, Series D, Series E, IPO, post-IPO, Rule of 40 growth, right? After spending 7 years with them and having seen the massive success that they accomplished, I started looking for something new to do. And one thing that I had not done before is the solutioning side of cybersecurity, right? I had known Mohit for almost 4 years. I actually have been helping the product advancement over those 4 years. And so I started scouting for ideas from my friends and colleagues, and almost universally, it was about, hey, have you looked into Symmetry Systems? And my response was, yes, I have worked with them for a long time. So long and short of it is, I have not done the solutioning side of this before. And so this was a great opportunity for me to come to do something different, but do something different with someone that I absolutely implicitly trust, and with a company that is on an upward trajectory to conquer the marketplace for this, right? So that just, all of that fit together very, very nicely like Lego blocks.
Well, I'm going to be the first pre-person besides people inside the company to congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
Back to everybody, episode 35, if you want to hear Anand's story, which is compelling of itself, of course. I remember walking away from that episode and going, okay, there's a whole lot more there than I had anticipated, and walked away with a greater appreciation for your accomplishments. So truly appreciate that.
I have a quick story for the...
Please do. Yes, we love stories.
Yeah. So the way I met Anand was through a really great VC in Austin, and he kept going, should I introduce you to Anand? No, he's going to chew you out. Should I introduce you to Anand? No, I can't do that to a young startup. He's too young.
Yeah, he's gonna tear you. Yeah, I got
exactly. So Anand just has this reputation of really exacting standards.
Yeah.
But what we found is after our meeting, he just called me up and be like, hey, look, you guys need to go a long way, but here's what I saw, here's what we think. And I just thought he was so kind and so correct.
Right.
So we sort of started hanging out. He he has a really awesome team at Alchemy. He's like, hey, team, take a look and give feedback. So it took us like a year and a half of just continuous improvements to kind of come to be like, okay, you're now ready for, hard financial services environments that are deeply regulated, work with a really crack team. So it's been just a huge honor to work with Anand and his team, Clinton, and the rest of the crew.
So that's going to beg another question from me that outside of what we talked about, which is, what impact does a well-seasoned CISO have on that startup journey?
Huge. So very tangibly, the biggest gap for us as a kind of a deep tech / science type thing, we know we have many tools. We have compilers, we have operating systems, we can use AI, we can do anything. But what's the small set of things that have the highest ROI for real practitioners, right? And then how do you sequence those? So the sequencing, when we first came out, we had visibility and control really deeply tied together. The thesis was that data and identities are the key and we should kind of really focus on that. But I think to roll it out, there are security teams, there are second line of control teams, there are developers or data lake. Just understanding the ecosystem and how do you roll this out, I would say Anand and team had a huge impact. And look, here's how you start with visibility. And here, these days, Alchemy is power using anomaly detection and all these really deep advanced things that one couldn't do before. But it's been a step-by-step journey. And for us, getting to be able to break the problem down into a sequence of products and features within products, I would say design partners like Anand, Chris Castaldo, Brian Castagna, all these guys have been instrumental.
And David, if I can add to that, I think one more aspect that is really crucial these days is the usability side of it, right? I think many companies don't realize this until it is too late, that you can have great research, great thesis, but if you cannot parse it out to be useful by an average cybersecurity practitioner, then your product has limits of advancement, right? And so that's the other factor that I had the opportunity to partner with Mohit and team on. And so as a result of that, we have built a product that is very intuitive, easy to adopt, and the average practitioner within most organizations can figure it out after some brief time spent with inside of the product.
Love it. Okay, so we're going to get to kind of a core kind of thing here. We're going to talk about like data security generally, right? Obviously, that's a space you guys are in. Let's start basics. What are some of the key core components of successful data security in kind of this day and age?
I can take a stab at it and hand it over to Anand. So for me, I think the one big jump was coming in deep research. Data security always was tied closely to access control. What data do you have, like data types, and who can access it? So whether it is human identities or now called service roles or non-human identities, how's the information flowing? This was core, but I think in industry, traditionally, it kind of got siloed into encryption, lots of key management and crypto work, and then separately data loss prevention, DLP, which is you're just scanning at the perimeter looking for data going out. And I don't think that those widgets, encryption is a mechanism. DLP is like what is the overarching strategy was kind of missing. And I feel like now just the modern data security, really the core pillars are the 3 axes, like data classification and what data do you have, identity, like who are the identity, what the identity types are, and what are they doing with it.
Right.
This helps you figure out, but the key thing is that these all have to be done together. A common pitfall that I see is kind of trying to do them in sequence. What data do I have when I have tens of petabytes and always creating more? You will never end that access.
Yeah.
Right? Who can access it? It's such a dynamic environment. Workloads, containers going up and down. We will never finish, right? So you have to spiral on all these 3 axes all at once. And to us, that was the heart of data security posture management, DSPM, kind of treating this as a very large-scale risk management problem where you're spiraling along all 3 attributes, as opposed to go solve classification using tool A, go get an entitlements IGA tool, go get a database activity monitoring tool. It's not 3 different problems. It's one problem.
Yeah. So does the where should it be in the axis at all? That's where my brain immediately goes. So tell me why not?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually a really tricky thing with this. Typically, if I had an old school on-prem environment where you immediately map to a lot of controls like physical data center controls, network controls, things like this. Whereas knowing like, hey, it's in bucket ID ABCD,
Right.
it almost doesn't matter.
Right.
What really, when I think a lot of times where moves to which environment, is it in production? Is it in non-production? And where also maps to, is my data of lower 48 states going out of US? Is,
Right.
European data going out of? So in all those cases, really the key insight is non-prod is open to more identities and partners and external identities. If I go send the data to US, the problem is not that it's in a server in the US, it's open to now people who can now see that data in the US. Like that might be the concern someone outside has, or so on. So it's really like if we kind of go 2 or 3 whys deeper, it really ends at, oh, I don't want this type of identity to see and then act on this type of data.
Yeah. So
I think just unrolling
takes care of it.
That's right. That's right. So unrolling it is more important. So the where sort of gets subsumed into who can see it.
Love it.
I think the intelligent interconnectedness is so crucial, and that's the differentiator for Symmetry, right? So if you think about it, David, data discovery has been around for a long time.
Yes.
Data classification has been around for a long time. How our approach is different is we are tying all of these together into a interconnected axial format that we make it very apparent to the user, right? So data is tied with identity, right? And it is tied with where the location of the data is. So when you have 3 pieces of the puzzle, you are massively more intelligent because you can figure out how my data is getting used and where my excessive permissions may be, right? I'll just give a very simple example to illustrate the power of this. A big problem in most organizations is the problem of overprivilege. Mm-hmm. And a mechanism that we talked about simplifies the resolution of overprivilege, because if you know how identities are using data, you can subtract the data from their privilege that they're not using at all or haven't used it for an extensive period, right? In my deployment of Symmetry, I was able to reduce privilege sprawl by 57% in a matter of like a couple of months.
Wow.
Without any impacts, because I was removing excessive privilege that no one was using anyways. So I was not causing consternation among users thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do my work, right? I'm being challenged to do so much, and now I have this issue of justifying my privilege, right? You solve that problem easily through a platform like this and through the intelligence that it brings to the table.
So again, I'm going to go off script a little bit, but again, I try to keep it very natural. Yes. So is there anybody else in the DSPM space using this 3-axis? Or is this an origination from Symmetry?
So we talked to Gartner for about 1.5 years before they coined DSPM and in 22 and called us out for helping drive that. I think even today, the market is really over-indexing on data discovery and classification.
Okay.
And we've been doing so many RFPs where the folks start off with like, hey, this year I just want to classify. Next year I will actually put protections in place. Whereas what we see once the POC starts is when you see the issues, you're not waiting a year to go fix them. Those are happening.
I don't know any CISO that would want to do that.
Zero, exactly. So they are not sequential. But today, I think the products are really over-indexing on just classification. And the identity side is like, I'll tell you which database user touched it. But that's not the question. The question is, what contractors can access customer data? Mm-hmm. And contractors might be jumping 5 or 6 series of AD groups, cloud roles and groups, and then materialized views in your data store, and then getting to the data. So if you can't unroll the whole path, then it's not as useful. So I would say right now we're probably the one. I mean, I love Varonis. I mean, people.
I mean, it wasn't like a trap or anything to it, because the leading down this path of coming from academic, right? Is this a case where Symmetry is going to move in the direction of being the thought leader and publishing maybe like a framework or something like that? Because it sounds to me like there's an opportunity here to really press on that.
We are doing a series of roundtables. Thank you, Alyssa, for hosting them. On bringing the community together. It's just common open format, dspm.org, to let's all converge on the RFP spec. What is the set of expectations and outcomes? What is the set of types of plumbing to expect? So one of the big things we are driving in terms of just being respectful for our customers is I, as a vendor, don't want to see your data to be able to help protect it.
Right.
All the technical stuff has been ironed out to the point where I can just spin up data guard, spin up Symmetry within the customer's environment, and everything stays there. That should be a default expectation.
Right.
Right? It's really hard to do on my side, but the customers shouldn't care. They should expect it.
Yeah, I don't want you to open up a huge attack surface by trying to protect my data, right?
That's exactly right.
And in today's day and age of supply chain attacks, right?
Exactly.
You should not do that. So.
Right. No, I like that. Okay, so it sounds to me like you're not just pressing in that direction. Like it is, in the end, you're going to wind up being the thought leader as well. As well as really memorializing that
Absolutely.
in the industry.
We want to be a super active participant in this community, and help set, standards for what, organizations should expect.
Great. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit on the prep. This is kind of one of my favorite areas, which is orgs haven't been really successful in doing data security in the past, and I can guarantee you, people listening, they probably just shuddered right now, probably like driving behind the wheel of their car, because they have those memories of times past where they tried this and it just didn't work out, or and years into things like that. So what's different now? What's the change? How can you look somebody in the eye and say, Dave, as a CISO, I'm telling you it's different this time?
So I can take that one, David. Having done the deployment side before, I had the quote unquote fortune of deploying one of the legacy solutions at a very large healthcare company. And it took me almost 3 years to get just the preliminary version of that done. And even in that time frame, I was yielding minimal benefit out of the deployment of that program, right? I was getting checkbox, I have data security in place, but in terms of actual benefit, it was not proportionate to the amount of financial capital that we invested in deploying that platform. I have done a few of these on the legacy side before, and they have all been like that, always a challenge because of the way those deployment happens. I think the fundamental change that has happened with the DSPM technology is that it has reduced the threshold of deployment. For example, Symmetry can be deployed in half an hour inside of your environment. How it has reduced? Because it is taking advantage of native cloud features to connect to your native cloud data stores. How it has been reduced is because it is taking advantage of APIs, and we have like a built-in connectors, like you can connect to Salesforce to understand all the data inside of your Salesforce, right? Or you can connect to your Jira to understand all of your data inside of your Jira. So that APIization of the data in various platforms and our ability to build connectors so that we can peek into all of these platforms and bring a single pane of glass back to you on all of your data inside of your organization, right? So that's how we have reduced the threshold of the complexity of deployment of data security platform in various sectors and industries. This is very exciting, and I would say it's also very timely, because this is the time with the AI revolution going on in various companies that a platform like ours kind of drives quick deployment and massive visibility, which makes it easier for you to get the most out of your AI initiatives inside of your organization. You want to add something to that, Mohit?
That's perfect. That's I think the kind of technology side of the answer, and I fully agree. More APIs, better technology, better AI as well, better data lake technology to build such products with and ship into customers' clouds. I think the other part, the process and the people side, is also really well aligned. And I think that's what's driving the market of it. Meaning on the process side, people who want to deploy AI, they're bringing the org, right? And the collaboration. There's a chief AI officer, data officer, there's cross-functional teams in almost every large enterprise that we're deploying in. So the process side is being worked on, and the people side, meaning not just the company, but general people are asking for, hey, GDPR, you can complain about it, but it's just the people telling us like, hey, show us some respect. Like, I want to know what is happening to my data, right? Yeah. We see the cases happen with, like the Facebook giving data to Cambridge Analytica, etc. I mean, it's kind of not their fault because that's the dominant model. Like you take the data and go and please take care, right? Instead, I think now we can recognize the people's request that let's put controls around the data itself so that it travels and the controls are still visible, visibility is also present, etc. So I think all three vectors are aligned. That's why you're seeing so many companies being formed, which pushes the entire market forward. So it's just each thing building on top of each other. That's what feels different to me.
I'll close out by saying, David, that what I said before, 2025 is the year of data security and DSPM. Circumstances have conspired to make it a priority for most organizations. Circumstances like AI, circumstances like massive cost over explosion, because if you don't manage the data sprawl, you are paying through your nose your cloud costs, right? I mean, in some cases, what we have found is that customers have unused data in cloud that they are paying heavily for that could be eliminated or moved to cold storage to do massive savings. And that in itself is a substantial benefit from a FinOps side for the various companies, right? 2025 is the year of the DSPM and data security, and the organizations are natively interested in it, and there is budgeted line items, etc., in most companies to tackle this problem. So I'm really excited about the future that is in front of us.
So you took us right into the next segment, which is AI security, right? And so one of the key areas that we kind of landed upon in prep was the confluence of data and identity security. So can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because as you brought that up, I was like, yes. So I want to hear the experts talk about it.
Awesome. So the way we see this space is that we talked about access control. That's really about what data you have, who has access to it. Abstracting out the details of which cloud, which database or data store and all of these things, which applications you're coming through. If you abstract that out, it really boils down to data meets identity. And I think AI is super interesting because a lot of times AI in a copilot / agents for per person setting, the copilots are assuming the permissions and privileges of a human. The way we would roll out service roles as like, hey, here's a service role for an application. When it's tied to a database, it's much more fixed function.
Right.
Whereas people, okay, I have access to the company holiday folder, I have access to the board folder. And now if an AI runs on my behalf and indexes everything, and it's now open as an API for others AIs to talk to my copilot.
Right.
Now that's a completely new attack surface that is really putting this data identity graph, right, into overdrive. Like AI, if there was a vulnerability in terms of least privilege, AI will make sure that every single employee can exploit it to the maximum, knowingly or unknowingly, right? They're processing emails, they're processing data. So I think AI sort of assumes the role of the identity, but by doing it automatically, it puts it into the attack surface into overdrive. The key thing there, though, is that a lot of the AI security work, most of it really is focused on AI safety. Right? Hey, I want to make sure it's not telling people how to make weapons and all of these kind of things, right? The AI security work really is very, very early. People are like, oh, I'll put a prompt shield or a prompt guard. It's like a firewall for your prompts.
Right.
But this is not a SQL language. This is not like web app firewalls where you can put some regexes and kind of feel good about it.
Right.
The space of concepts is super broad and the firewalls are really flimsy. What we have found is if you don't understand the data layer, what data is being used either through RAG models or through fine-tuning and so on to answer the questions, and we're not overlaying protections at that level, the prompt guards are really flimsy. So treating this as a data meets identity. On whose behalf is the AI operating? And what data is it consuming? What data flows? If you ask me a question versus Anand asks me a question, my AI should know that and route different facts. So we had a paper at DEF CON last year talking through this. Happy to expand more, but that's the rough.
Well, I think we can put a link in the show notes if you guys have it up there. I think easy enough to do.
Pilot, yeah.
So if you would, please. What you got on that?
I think Mohit covered the broad aspects of AI and data and identity well. I will add just one more element to it, which is the agentic AI side of it.
That's right. That's what I want to be my next questions.
as I mean, Gartner has said that 2025 is the year of the AI agents, right? If you look at it, right, I mean, why agentic AI needs a DSPM type of solution is because in the end, it's all about identities and how the identities are using data, right? Even AI agents will need identities to run and operate inside of your environments, right? So frankly, I mean, that element of the problem, I think, is a little bit more defined and a little bit more controlled because with AI agent identities and what data they are touching in the environments and how they are using it, a platform like ours makes it very visible and very apparent. And you can even do the enforcement and operational side of it using this platform because you can put some guardrails around what agentic AI is allowed to use and at what thresholds do you alert your security operations to say, hey, my agent is going rogue now or has been harvested by a malware or a malicious actor, right? So the good news is that we can enable the usage of AI agents in your environment or make the threshold easier because the monitoring is tied to the identities and data that we are already monitoring for everything else anyways, right? So
is AI going to drive the improvements in data security over the, not just 2025, but the coming years? Is this going to be the hyper fuel growth that we're going to see in data security over the coming years?
So that's a really good question. I think AI will drive will create the pull for it. And I think the easy answer is like, hey, large language models are great, but I don't want to send my customers' data to someone else's large language model, right? I want to have it located. Our kind of technical lens there is that there are many attributes to data, to identities, to the flows, and we use small language models for different purposes. So the small language model for understanding anomaly detection and MITRE attack detection is different than the one that's trying to figure out what types of data there are and what the entitlements could resolve to, etc. So we kind of use, but to me, that's a smaller detail. I actually think the biggest gains could come from getting a workflow tool that enables all the people in the environment to be able to collaborate. Because people have a lot of domain knowledge about their environment, and they're always communicating, but it's always sometimes in plain English. It's in like open free text fields. If you ask people, like, this is what the problem with the catalogs is. You have to go manually and pick from a drop down and, this is not high classified. This is not, you have this like really rigid tools that don't let you be extensible for your need, right? Whereas to me, AI plumbing into people expressing their desires, their constraints, goals in a more natural language. And then AI helps translate that into a more rigorous machine checkable proof type of language. I think that's where huge, huge opportunity is. Because if I can unburden the people, like you're not making a high stakes one-time decision about how many labels you have. You're just sort of expressing like, hey, this feels important. I don't want this data going out there. Right?
Much like we're having a conversation.
Exactly.
Right? It's that natural.
It's that natural. And that gets translated into formally verifiable policies and gets scaled out across all environments. Now you're really putting your people to great use. People make the best judgments or inform them about the judgments, coach them. All of that interaction can happen. But I feel like that's where the big leaps are, not in like, oh, can I classify the data better or can I anomaly detect it better? That's kind of the traditional usage.
Yeah.
Think about how much work you do on your PC right now that is not, and data input and data, I see where you're headed with it. Like all that, like 95% of what you do is not really contextualized.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so you're saying the next step is it's going to pull that in, it's going to contextualize it, and it's going to drive better decision making for your business.
That's, if I could have answered it in one word, you put it. Keywords context.
That's my job, right? That's what I bring to the table.
I think, David, we are interviewing you in the next round.
No, I mean, that's what I love about doing this show, because I get to talk to smart people and put it in ways I understand, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, and I hadn't realized that yet. I was still stuck on agents, quite honestly, because I had heard on another podcast that billions of dollars is going to be invested in agents. Yeah. But where does that get you? And what you're saying is the agents are one thing, but there's so much that we do as human beings that is still just left on the table that never gets action taken upon it. Right. Imagine if you could take your CFO's experience and knowledge on a daily basis and put that into a model and start leveraging.
Exactly.
Wow.
And every business unit, every
business
expert,
unit.
and that's training the model that's guiding all the protections, turning one-way doors into two-way doors, etc. That's awesome.
All right, let's talk about the market for a little bit because I want to get to everything. That was a great conversation, by the way. I love that part. Okay, so DSPM's pretty new, relatively, compared to all these other ones. Like you said, you talked to Gartner for a year and a half. How do you manage your company's messaging relative to the natural push-pull, right? We talked about it a little bit, but I want to maybe a little bit deeper. So you have the analysts. Analysts are carving out new areas all the time. And, what does it mean to do this, that, and the other? Then you have CISOs that are kind of stuck in this, I know the way that I do my business today. This is how I do it. Yeah, Anand. Yeah. How do you manage that, right? So you're trying to please kind of both masters a little bit. So how do you work through that and educate both sides maybe?
I'll give the product version, and Anand, you can give the broader version as well. I think on the product side, we are in an extremely lucky position where the value proposition is something that anyone should be able to understand. Like, hey, you have a really large org. The complexity is there. We are all aware of it. I have AWS, I have Oracle Cloud, I have Azure, so on and so forth. But if I ask a simple question like, show me all the customer data that contractors can access. Show me all the PCI cardholder data that's located inside the PCI environment that does not flow out. Like, show me how you're ensuring that. Or have you ensured that there's no PCI cardholder data outside of this PCI? These questions are so simple. And practitioners, I think, instinctively realize that, I can layer in EDR, CSPM, XDR, all of this stack. And when an incident happens, they're like, oh, no, I don't know what data is impacted.
Right.
So,
which is the first question, by the way.
Exactly, like scoping the, right?
Right.
So I think this is one of those like once in a 50-year type scenario where the problem is so simple to state, so clearly not doable easily today, that we just leaned really heavily into plain English. Super simple, right? We are fully in your cloud. We live in our customers' worlds. Gartner called that out right up at the top. Then we'll solve this problem of what data and so on and so forth, right? In one box to identify risk. Like, where's the biggest risk and what action mitigates the risk the most? What's the actionable component, right? And that's kind of what we lean on. Analysts have been great. I mean, we've only worked with Gartner so far. They've been awesome at just kind of filtering through and creating a space around it. And practitioners have been really great. In fact, I would say VCs are an under sort of appreciated part of this game. People who funded us, but who also funded the whole community of DSPM companies or data security companies. All of them go and push the market and hold dinners and roundtables and all these things. And the whole community sort of cooks the problem into the solution form factor. So it's been really great. I have no complaints.
Yeah, I think for me, the market messaging needs to be tied to the business domain in which I'm operating. And what is the benefit of the platform to this business domain? So I think that combination makes it much more potent as a consideration for a budgetary line item, right? The second factor that is really crucial is like, what is it replacing? As you know, David, the financials are limited and the economic climate is getting a little bit tighter.
Right.
And so in a scenario like that, it's hard to germinate new money. You have to work with that you have, and plus a little bit extra that you get every year.
Right.
So the DSPM contextualization for me is, it is replacing the legacy data security products on which I have spent money, and maybe I might be able to save some in the process and allocate it to something else, because general rule of thumb is that DSPM is going to be less expensive than your very, very expensive legacy products. And I can tell you, I've spent millions on that with my other companies, right? So that to me is the second factor, like what can I replace, right? The third and the final factor is the value prop side of it, right? How am I becoming more better on the foundational security of my organization? I'm a firm believer, as a kind of a CISO, I'm a firm believer that if you do the foundational things well, you have solved 90% of your problem. You don't need to go catch shiny objects all the time, right? And data security to me has become very, very foundational. So to me, that's the final piece of the puzzle. DSPM is solving a foundational problem for me. It's not a shiny object anymore. And so I want to take advantage of that to do well what I haven't been able to traditionally do well in the past, right?
So what I'm hearing and kind of seeing with what we're talking about here, you potentially have the ability to provide new and unique insights into data. And data is really, again, as we all know, the foundation of it all. Maybe even more so than the folks that actually do data in an organization.
Yeah.
Is there a space here where cybersecurity might become more of a value add because of the knowledge and information that we have about this data?
I fully agree. What we're seeing with our larger companies especially is that there are a lot of downstream stakeholders. Like there are legal officers who are saying, hey, when we terminate a contract with a customer, I want to make sure all their data is removed or archived for retention purposes, right?
You're speaking to me very clearly. That's in my world, my day job, that is something that we have to be very aggressive about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then there's risk officers who are like, hey, I'm sitting on data from 2005, 2008. These are PHI or PII type information. That's just risk. Let's at least lock it up somewhere and save money in the process. So then the cloud infra guy, CIO office gets really happy, right? There's also the compliance side where I think traditionally compliance has been very screenshot and spreadsheet and email based. And with this, you can sort of automate. You're not just showing, hey, here's some evidence. You're showing here's the continuous controls in place around the asset that your questions are about, right? Segregation of duties. All right, here's how my identities go into a prod environment versus not, right?
So you got me excited, David, because
I saw you light up.
Yeah. So in many situations, security can be considered adversarial, right? In many organizations. This is one place where it's highly collaborative by the very definition and design of it, right? Another great example, in addition to what Mohit called out, is the data and AI side of it, right? Your AI is going to be as good as the data that you have. And to know where all of your data is and to understand what is ready for AI so that you can train your models better and all those things, right? A platform like DSPM and Symmetry, it gives such level of visibility that you can practically see the chief data officer and their organization salivating over like, hey, I know where everything is at right now. I can be like twice more effective or thrice more effective, right? Your historical data governance tools haven't done a good job of understanding where all of your data is or the quality of that data. We are bringing that quality to the table for better APIization, for better AIization of your entire organization. So to me, like this addresses a fundamental problem of changing things from what has been adversarial to much more collaborative and much more kind of like, hey, we can partner together on this.
All right. Running up on time. Final question. What's on the horizon? And I want to, for both Symmetry Systems, right? So where you guys headed, and then the industry as a whole, because obviously you're going to track to that, but kind of give me both flavors.
On Symmetry, we think there is going to be a lot more customer outcomes that are just plain English. We save petabytes of data. We enable 350 teams to use AI, and we can show that it's safe. These type of really plain English, clearly valuable outcomes coming out of security teams. And that's the type of outcomes we're driving today. We're going to turn that into much more of a scaled out operation. So that's what we're looking forward to. For the market, I think this is, again, a once in a generation opportunity to abstract out, just like PyTorch, TensorFlow, abstracted out CPUs, GPUs, FPGAs, and different, right? And enabled the domain experts to be productive, like work with tensors, right? Not CUDA data sets and such. I think we'll end up doing that with security, where every team will be able to be naturally a better steward of data, right? And because the tools are giving visibility in ways that are more plain English, understandable, and then synthesizing controls automatically. That's where, and hopefully we can go away from FUD jargon, zero trust this, and scattered spider that, this sort of stuff. Right? That's my hope for our field.
I think Mohit did a phenomenal job of covering all points here, so I have nothing to add to that. No.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, Mohit, Anand, it's a pleasure having you on, an honor, quite honestly. We appreciate you kicking off the first industry series, but I learned so much. Obviously, I think we had some things going on there. Great depth of conversation. I look forward to seeing you guys grow. Congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
And but colleagues and friends, I renew the call. It's time to professionalize the role of CISO. In the meantime, I wish you health, happiness, and success in your journey in becoming the professional CISO. Let's do this.
We're professionalizing the CISO role, so please subscribe to the Professional CISO Podcast.